الله الرحمن الرحيم. السيد عبد الله شاهد رئيس الدورة السادسة.
Mr. Abdullah Shahed, Excellency, President of the 76th session of the General Assembly, I would like to first and foremost congratulate you and your country on assuming the presidency of the current session of the General Assembly of the United Nations, and I wish you every success in your endeavors. I also commend the central role of the Secretary General of the United Nations through his tireless efforts to uphold the principles of the Charter. The Charter has been a rulebook and a reference in international nations for more than 75 years, and it remains a hope in establishing a rule-based international order and a peaceful world. Ladies and gentlemen, the onset of the global pandemic almost 2 years ago has shown that there are common traits for humanity, but there are other aspects that can be shared, such as challenges, no matter our level of development. Here, it is appropriate to point out the relevance of this year's theme, reflecting the need to build our resilience to COVID-19 and our hope in recovery. All obstacles preventing countries from accessing vaccines in a fair and equitable manner as a top priority. In that context, allow me to take this opportunity from this high tribune to present Egypt's view of today's world and our contribution to overcoming global challenges as a founding member of the United Nations and a number of regional organizations, so that we can look at the challenges of today's world. Mr. President, the Egyptian state is quantities of vaccines. Indeed, developed countries continue to receive the majority of vaccines produced globally. Egypt underscores the need for a swift and effective response to meet the needs of the African continent. Indeed, our continent is that which is most impacted by the pandemic, while it has also continued to face other equally daunting challenge policies, allowing us to implement ambitious social programs for the benefit of the most vulnerable groups. And we have achieved the SDGs in a number of areas across Egypt. Egypt has also managed to reduce disparities between rural and urban areas, as we are convinced that the provision of basic services in all parts of the country will promote political and social inclusion by creating suitable conditions for the freedom of thought and innovation to allow innovation to flourish, creating more impetus for progress. Mr. President, Egypt is well aware of the threats that environmental degradation pose to all aspects of our life and that of future generations, if not their survival, especially as a result of climate change. Its adverse effects have become evident to all, as demonstrated by the many severe climate events across the world in recent months. From floods to heavy rainfall to unprecedented spikes in temperature and wildfires. These events have had human, economic, and social implications, which then add to the heavy burden of states and governments, struggling to guarantee the prosperity and well-being of their people. Given our common moral responsibility towards future generation and in line with our national vision and international commitments, Egypt spares no effort for greater coordination on climate issues. This is important if we are to avoid the point of no return, a point at which climate change would have become so entrenched it would be impossible to roll back. As an active participant in the climate change negotiations, Egypt looks forward to hosting the 27th Conference of State Parties in 2022. Mr. President, terrorism remains one of the largest challenges facing humanity today. In addition to violating people's most fundamental rights, especially the right to life, this phenomenon also distracts governments from fulfilling their a comprehensive approach that would go beyond security and military confrontation of terrorists and terrorist groups, but that would also include social, economic, development, and ideological factors as well. We must focus on the sources of terrorism and tackle those factors that push individuals towards this phenomenon. And this approach should be rooted both in national actions and international cooperation. In this regard, all countries must uphold their obligations under international law and relevant social security, Security Council resolutions, corrects the interpreter. I stress the need to hold accountable those countries that sponsor and harbor terrorists, including foreign terrorist fighters, by offering them shelter and support and facilitating their transit through territories, which threatens international peace and security. Ladies and gentlemen, Egypt is committed to promoting the human rights of its citizens. We make every effort to this end in full respect of the principles of citizenship and the rule of law. The Egyptian state is fully cognizant of the fact that Egyptians must be at the center of our comprehensive development efforts, the aim of which is to guarantee the dignity, rights, and freedoms of Egyptian citizens. The situation of human rights in Egypt has recently seen marked developments, reflecting the rights and freedoms guaranteed by the provisions of our Constitution and its amendments, and the relevant updated laws and legislation. The National Human Rights Strategy that Egypt launched a few days ago, following society-wide and civil society consultations, showcases Egypt's inclusive and constructive approach to all issues related to human rights. Mr. President, Egypt's election to the chairmanship of the current 15th session of the United Nations Peacebuilding Commission is the culmination of Egypt's continued and active contribution to promoting the United Nations peacebuilding architecture since its inception in 2005.
This demonstrates the confidence that the international community has in Egypt to lead international efforts in this regard. We are the 7th largest contributor of male and female troops and police to UN peacekeeping operations. Mr. President, Egypt has always reiterated that there can be no stability in the Middle East without a just, lasting and comprehensive solution to the Palestinian question, which remains the central cause for the Arab region. This must happen in accordance with international resolutions to establish a Palestinian state along the June 4, 1967 border with East Jerusalem as its capital. In this regard, Egypt stresses the need to consolidate the ceasefire agreement reached on the 20th of May 2021. Egypt also calls upon the international community to take the necessary measures to improve the living conditions of the Palestinian people and to ensure humanitarian deliveries to the Palestinian peoples. Donors must be called upon to support UNRWA. This would pave the way for the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip. Egypt has also announced a pledge of $500 million for reconstruction efforts. The Middle East has a strategic location, but it is also in one of the most unstable regions in the world. This compounds global and shared challenges. This means that there are specific challenges faced by countries in the region. The concept of the strong and cohesive nation-state is under threat from factors including division and fragmentation, be it sectarian, political, or ethnic division. This has meant that countries rich in natural resources, history, and civilization, such as Iraq, a brother country, or rich in culture and diversity like Lebanon and Syria, or with resources and wealth such as Libya, or with strategically important locations such as Yemen, suffer numerous challenges. This proves that there is no alternative to the concept of the inclusive nation-state. States that do not distinguish between its citizens and prevent any interference in the affairs of the Arab region. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, Egypt is closely linked to its African context, something that we are immensely proud of. This is geographical continuity, but also existential continuity. Hence the importance of cooperation of countries on this continent. But this must be a two-way street. It cannot be unilateral, being determined by one party to the detriment of others. Egypt recognizes its neighbors' right to development, but we are a country that suffers from droughts and people live under the water poverty line. The Nile is Egypt's lifeline, which explains the extreme anguish that Egypts feel over the Renaissance Dam. You are probably all aware of the current state of the negotiations between Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan, which have lasted for 10 years. We have come up against intransigence and an unjustified refusal to engage positively in negotiations in consecutive steps. This is a unilateral approach and a policy of impositions which could further destabilize the region. Egypt thus sought the help of the United Nations Security Council to send UN observers and bolster African mediation efforts. Egypt remains committed to reaching, as soon as possible, a comprehensive, balanced and legally binding agreement on the filling and operation of the Ethiopian dam. This aims at ensuring the survival of 150 million people in Egypt and Sudan and to avoid causing irreparable damage to the peoples of both countries. This is based not only on the values of equity and logic, but also on robust international legal grounds, which call for the fair and just use of joint water resources in international rivers. Ladies and gentlemen, multilateralism is key. We are facing a great many challenges and difficulties. However, multilateralism remains our only refuge from escalating conflicts and disputes. Given the multiplicity of challenges facing us today, we must reflect on the best way to mobilize the resources needed to overcome these challenges, and this is a priority for the benefit of all of humanity. This is Egypt's clarion call to all of humanity. Let us stand together to save ourselves before it is too late. Let us arm ourselves not with the logic of force, but the force of logic. Thank you for your kind attention, and I wish you all a successful session.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, my fellow delegates, to all those who dedicate themselves to this noble mission of this institution, it's my honor to speak to you for the first time as President of the United States. So much to this devastating pandemic that continues to claim lives around the world and impact so much on our existence. we're mourning more than 4.5 million people, people of every nation, from every background. Each death, treaties, support for arms control measures that reduce the risk and enhance transparency. Our approach is firmly grounded and fully consistent with the United Nations mission and the values we've agreed to when we drafted this charter. These are commitments we all made and that we're all bound to uphold. And as we strive to deal with these urgent challenges, whether they're long-standing or newly emerging, we must also deal with one another. All of the major powers of the world have a duty, in my view, to carefully manage their relationships so they do not tip from responsible competition to conflict. The United States will compete and will compete vigorously and lead with our values and our strength. We'll stand up for our allies and our friends and oppose attempts by stronger countries to dominate weaker ones, whether through changes to territory by force, economic coercion, technical exploitation, or disinformation. But we're not seeking, say it again, we are not seeking a new Cold War or a world divided into rigid blocks. The United States is ready to work with any nation that steps up and pursues peaceful resolution to shared challenges, even if we have intense disagreements in other areas, because we'll all suffer the consequences of our failure if we do not come together to address the urgent threats like COVID-19 and climate change, or enduring threats like nuclear proliferation. The United States remains committed to preventing Iran from gaining a nuclear weapon. We're working with the P5+1 to engage Iran diplomatically and to seek a return to JCPOA. We're prepared to return to full compliance if Iran does the same. Similarly, we seek serious and sustained diplomacy to pursue the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. We seek concrete progress toward an available plan with tangible commitments that would increase stability on the peninsula and in the region, as well as improve the lives of the people in the democratic built our United Nations, broke the cycle of war and destruction, and laid the foundations for more than 7 decades of relative peace and growing global prosperity. Now, we must again come together to affirm the inherent humanity that unites in this pandemic and making sure we're better prepared for the next one. Staving off climactic climate change and increasing our resilience to the impacts we already are seeing. Ensuring a future where technologies are a vital tool to solving human challenges and empowering human potential, not a source of greater strife and repression.
President of
These
the
are the
Republic
challenges
of
that will
Turkey,
determine what
and
the
to
world looks like
invite
for our children
him
and our
to address the
grandchildren
Assembly.
and what they'll inherit. We can only meet them by looking to the future.
Esteemed President,
I stand here today for the first
Venerable
time in
heads of
20
state
years
and
the United
government,
States not at war.
Honorable Secretary
Turn the
General,
page.
distinguished delegates, on behalf of myself and my nation, I would like to wholeheartedly greet you. I wish that the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly will be beneficial for our countries and the entire human race. I'm very pleased to be at the General Assembly again after 2 years to address you, because as the humanity in the last 2 years, we've really been through painful times. We have lost 4.6 million people, including our friends, relatives, and loved ones during the COVID-19 pandemic, which was labeled as the biggest health crisis of the last century. Despite all the efforts displayed and the progress we've made in vaccination, we still witness the continuation of the negative ramifications of the pandemic. In such a climate that we are observing the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly, and I do believe that the messages of solidarity and cooperation which we will be conveying here will not only support the fight against the pandemic, but also increase the hopes of billions of people who are going through very challenging times. Our General Assembly needs to be strengthened so that the international community can contribute more effectively to the solution of global problems. And I would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to Mr. Volkan Bozkır, President of the 75th General Assembly, for his fruitful work towards that direction. And I do believe that Mr. Abdullah Shahid, who recently assumed the presidency of the 76th General Assembly, will carry the flag forward to greater heights. And as Turkey, all our responsibilities so that the General Assembly can carry out its activities in the most efficient way. On this occasion, I also would like to congratulate Mr. Guterres, who once again assumed the duty of United Nations Secretary General, and wish him continued success. It's extremely fitting that this year's General Assembly has been organized under the theme Building Resilience Through Hope. First of all, I would like to express one fact, no matter how painful it might be to hear. Unfortunately, we were reminded once again during this pandemic that the entire world are a part of a big family. But the solidarity test that we were put to failed us miserably. Especially the underdeveloped countries and poor segments of the societies were literally left to their fate in the face of the pandemic. The distorted structure of the global system, which rather creates problems instead of solutions, deepens those problems and condemns them to insolvency, also holds its share in the increased loss of lives around the world. At a time when millions of people have lost their lives and tens of millions of people are suffering in the grip of the virus, it is a disgrace for humanity that the vaccine nationalism is still being carried on through different methods. It's clear that a global disaster such as the COVID-19 pandemic can only be overcome through international cooperation and solidarity. It's not possible for any country to survive safely on its own before all countries are free from this pandemic. We hope that the will which we will be showcased in the General Assembly will constitute a turning point in understanding living in Germany. We, as Turkey, have tried to share the capabilities at our disposal with our friends and brothers and sisters around the world from day one, which complies with our belief, which is basically, let the people live so that the state can live. I would like to inform you that we will offer in the near future our national vaccine called Turkovac to the benefit continuation of social and economic life. Distinguished delegates, the events that we've witnessed remind us some of the realities once again. Our joys, like our sorrows, our sufferings, like our achievements, and our problems, like the solutions, are all common. When somebody acts with a fait accompli logic, the entire humanity would pay the bill, not just the major countries. We witnessed, lastly, in Afghanistan, in a very painful way, that the problems cannot be solved by imposing methods that do not take into account the realities or in the field. The people of Afghanistan have been left alone. They were abandoned with the consequences of instability and the conflicts. Peace, stability, and security will be established in the country as soon as possible, and that the Afghan people will find relief. And as Turkey, eternal duty towards the Afghan people during their difficult days. 10 years have gone by in the humanitarian drama in Syria, which caused the death of hundreds of thousands of people and the displacement of millions of people before the eyes of the whole world. While our country embraces close to 4 million Syrians, we are also battling on the ground terrorist organizations that have drowned the region. We are the only NATO ally which has fought Daesh, Korakor, and defeated this terrorist organization. Again, with our presence on the ground, we were able to stop the massacres and ethnic cleansing atrocities committed by the PKK terrorist organization's extensions in Syria. As a result of our efforts, and at the expense of our martyrs, we've saved the lives of millions of people and prevented them from being displaced. The international community cannot allow the Syrian crisis to linger on for another 10 years. We need to display a stronger will to find a political solution to the problem based on the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2254 and in a way that will meet the expectations of the Syrian people. We welcome the extension of the United Nations Humanitarian Assistance Mechanism, which is delivered to the northwest of Syria via Turkey for yet another 12 months. We hope that the conciliatory approach displayed on this issue will also be emulated in order to bring forward the political process and ensure the voluntary, safe, and dignified return of the asylum seekers. I would like to once again reiterate, in your presence, that making any distinction between the terrorist organizations in the region and using them as subcontractors in the field is unacceptable. Acts of terrorism in different countries around the world over the past 10 years have shown that terrorism is not only our common enemy, but our struggle against terrorist organizations that threaten the territorial integrity of Syria and our national security will continue with resolve. In our country, with the exception of the Syrians, there are also migrants under various statuses, the number of which currently exceeds 1 million. Because of the current developments in Afghanistan, we are faced with the possibility of another influx of migrants from this country. As a country that saved human dignity in the Syrian crisis, we no longer have the potential nor the capability to absorb new immigration. On the basis of fair burden and responsibility sharing, it is high time for all the stakeholders to do their part on this issue. A concrete attitude now needs to be displayed against those who erode the 1951 Geneva Convention and the international humanitarian law. Distinguished delegates, thanks to our strong support for international legitimacy in Libya, a ceasefire was declared, and then the Presidential Council and the National Unity Government were formed. I reiterate my call to the international community to stand by the legitimate government which represents all regions of Libya. One of the most important problems that fuels instability and threatens peace and security in our region is the Israeli and Palestinian conflict. As long as the persecution of the Palestinian people continues, lasting peace and stability in the Middle East is not possible. For this reason, invasion, annexation, and illegal settlement policies must absolutely and immediately be brought to an end. We will continue to stand up against the violation of the international status of Jerusalem, which is based on the United Nations Resolution of 1947, and against violations of the sanctity of the Haram al-Sharif and of the rights of the Palestinian people. The peace process and the vision of a two-state solution must be revived without further delay. The establishment of an independent and contiguous Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital on the basis of the 1967 borders remain amongst our primary objectives. Important steps have been taken forward vis-à-vis establishing stability in the Caucasus. By exercising its right of self-defense, Azerbaijan has ended the invasion of its own territory, which explored in the region to establish a lasting and a sustainable peace. We are determined to support every positive step forward that will be taken by the parties involved. We attach importance to the protection of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine, including the Crimea, whose annexation we do not recognize. Within China's territorial integrity perspective, we do believe that more efforts need to be displayed regarding the protection of the basic rights of the Muslim Uyghur Turks. We maintain our stance in favor of solving the ongoing problem in Kashmir for 74 years through dialogue between the parties and within the framework of relevant United Nations resolutions. We also support ensuring the safe, voluntary, and dignified return of Rohingya Muslims who are living under difficult circumstances in camps in Bangladesh and Myanmar back to their homelands. A fair, lasting, and a sustainable solution to the Cyprus question is possible only through a results-oriented, realistic approach. While the leader of one of the two peoples on the island, which the United Nations considers as equal, can address you, it's not fair that the other leader cannot make his voice heard on this platform. For a solution, it is necessary to reaffirm the sovereign equality and equal international status of the Turkish Cypriot people, and without any prejudice. The continuation of the calm environment in Eastern Mediterranean region is in our common interest. We hope that the problems regarding maritime boundary delimitation will be resolved within the framework of international law and good neighborly relations. For this, it is necessary, first of all, to abandon the mentality whereby Turkey, which has the longest coast in the Eastern Mediterranean, is completely disregarded in the region. Our proposal to organize in which all the actors in the region will be represented for dialogue and cooperation still remains on the table. Similarly, we believe that the problem in the Aegean Sea should be resolved through a bilateral dialogue. We also maintain our determination in the European Union membership process. We are in full solidarity with the continent and the African Union also today, drawing on the strength of our deep-rooted ties with Africa, which dates back 2 centuries. With this understanding, we continue our efforts to hold the 3rd Turkey-Africa Partnership Summit in Turkey in the forthcoming periods. With our Asia Anew initiative, we are consolidating Turkey's unifying position between Europe and Asia. Likewise, we attach great significance to developing our relations with Latin America and the Caribbean region on bilateral, and will continue to be by the side of every step taken forward for a safer, peaceful, prosperous, and equitable world for everyone. Distinguished delegates, while the Earth embraces millions of living species on its soil, it only expects us to respect the balance of nature in return for this generosity. Unfortunately, mankind has recklessly used the resources the Earth offered us in search of progress and development, which we pursued throughout history. At the end of this process that lasted for centuries, we are now facing threats entirely caused by men, outside nature's own balance. The problems, which we may classify under topics such as climate change, air pollution, water and food security, loss of biodiversity, have reached to such an extent that will steer us from a safe and a prosperous future for the entire human race. Among these topics, climate change is one we should particularly focus on, as beyond being an environmental problem, it will lead to irreparable consequences and uncertainty. Greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, which have increased by 50% compared to the pre-industrial period, literally elevate the world's temperature. Indeed, for some time now, disasters have been occurring all around the world caused by an increase of 1.1 degrees Celsius compared to the pre-industrial period. We are experiencing unusual events such as floods in Asia and Europe, hurricanes in America, drought in Africa, fires in the Mediterranean basin, rainfall on the peak of Greenland, and snowfall on the deserts. These disasters not only cause damage to the environment and the ecosystem, but also threaten people's life, now facing complete annihilation due to land use on the one hand and fires on the other. Another area affected by the increase in temperature is our seas. Expanding water and melting glaciers have raised sea levels by 20 centimeters over the past century. This figure is the fastest increase during the last 3,000 years. If effective measures will not be taken and greenhouse gas emissions will continue to increase, sea levels are expected to rise by more than 1 meter at the end of this century. Such a rise would mean that an important part of coastal cities and island states will be wiped out completely. I leave it to you to consider what would happen if the temperature increase would reach 1.5 Celsius or 2 Celsius, or even more. Paris, most, it's compulsory for countries with historical accountability for the emergence of problems, which led to responsibility. 3. Vision. Of course, we have other measures with respect to climate change. We prepared the action plan necessary for harmonization with the European Union's Green Deal and put it into effect in the past month. With the Zero Waste project led by First Lady, my wife, Her Excellency Emine Erdogan, we increased our recycling rate by 9 points in 3 years. We increased our sink areas by increasing our forest assets from 20.8 million hectares to approximately 23 million hectares. We increased the share of renewable energy resources in our electricity generation capacity to 53%. We have been promoting the steps that will structure our industry, that will restructure our industry in accordance with cleaner production activities for a better future. We are determined to bring these efforts forward by receiving the necessary financial support. Turkey is not indifferent to any global problem whatsoever, crisis or call, and will do its part on climate change and environmental protection to remain in good health.
I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of China to introduce an address by the head of state.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I now have the honor to present the statement by His Excellency President Xi Jinping of the People's Republic of China. Mr. President, the year 2021 is a truly remarkable one for the Chinese people. This year marks the centenary of the Communist Party of China. It is also the 50th anniversary of the restoration of the lawful seat of the People's Republic of China in the United Nations, a historic event which will be solemnly commemorated by China. We will continue our active efforts to take China's cooperation with the United Nations to a new level and make new and greater contributions to advancing the noble cause of the UN. Mr. President, a year ago, global leaders attended the high-level meetings marking the 75th anniversary of the UN and issued a declaration pledging to fight COVID-19 in solidarity, tackle challenges together, uphold multilateralism, strengthen the role of the UN, and work for the common future of present and coming generations. 1 year on, our world is facing the combined impacts of changes unseen in a century and the COVID-19 pandemic. In all countries, people long for peace and development more than ever before. Their call for equity and justice is growing stronger, and they are more determined in pursuing win-win cooperation. Right now, COVID-19 is still raging in the world, and profound changes are taking place in human society. The world has entered a period of new turbulence and transformation. It falls on each and every responsible statesman to answer the questions of our times and make a historical choice with confidence, courage, and a sense of mission. First, we must beat COVID-19 and win this decisive fight crucial to the future of humanity. The history of world civilization is also one of fighting pandemics. Rising to challenges, humanity has always emerged in triumph and achieved greater development and advancement. The current pandemic may appear overwhelming, but we, humanity, will surely overcome it and prevail. We should always put people and their lives first and care about the life, value, and dignity of every individual. We need to respect science, take a science-based approach, and follow the laws of science. We need to both follow routine, targeted COVID-19 protocols and take emergency response measures, and both carry out epidemic control and promote economic and social development. We need to enhance coordinated global COVID-19 response and minimize the risk of cross-border virus transmission. Vaccination is our powerful weapon against COVID-19. I have stressed on many occasions the need to make vaccine a global public good and ensure vaccine accessibility and affordability in developing countries. Of pressing priority is to ensure the fair and equitable distribution of vaccines globally. China will strive to provide a total of 2 billion doses of vaccines to the world by the end of this year. In addition to donating $100 million to COVAX, China will donate 100 million doses of vaccines to other developing countries in the course of this year. China will continue to support and engage in global science-based origins tracing and stands firmly opposed to political maneuvering in whatever form. Second, we must revitalize the economy and pursue more robust, greener, and more balanced global development. Development holds the key to people's well-being. Facing the severe shocks of COVID-19, we need to work together to steer global development towards a new stage of balanced, coordinated, and inclusive growth. To this end, I would like to propose a global development initiative. Staying committed to development as a priority, we need to put development high on the global macro policy agenda, strengthen policy coordination among major economies, and ensure policy continuity, consistency, and sustainability. We need to foster global development partnerships that are more equal and balanced, forge greater synergy among multilateral development cooperation processes, and speed up the implementation of the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Staying committed to a people-centered approach, we should safeguard and improve people's livelihoods and protect and promote human rights through development, and make sure that development is for the people and by the people, and that its fruits are shared among the people. We should continue our work so that the people will have a greater sense of happiness, benefit, and security, and achieve well-rounded development. Staying committed to benefits for all, we should care about the special needs of developing countries. We may employ such means as debt suspension and development aid to help developing countries, particularly vulnerable ones facing exceptional difficulties, with the emphasis on addressing unbalanced and inadequate development among and within countries. Staying committed to innovation-driven development, we need to seize the historical opportunities created by the latest round of technological revolution and industrial transformation, redouble efforts to harness technological achievements to boost productivity and foster an open, fair, equitable, and non-discriminatory environment for the development of science and technology. We should foster new growth drivers in the post-COVID era and jointly achieve leapfrog development. Staying committed to harmony between man and nature. We need to improve global environmental governance, actively respond to climate change, and create a community of life for man and nature. We need to accelerate transition to a green and low-carbon economy and achieve green recovery and development. China will strive to peak carbon dioxide emissions before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. This requires tremendous hard work, and we will make every effort to meet these goals. China will step up support for other developing countries in developing green and low-carbon energy, and will not build new coal-fired power projects abroad. Staying committed to results-oriented actions, we need to increase input in development, advance on a priority basis cooperation on poverty alleviation, food security, COVID-19 response and vaccines, development financing, climate change and green development, industrialization, digital economy, and connectivity, among other areas, and accelerate implementation of the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, so as to build a global community of development with a shared future. China has pledged an additional $3 billion of international assistance in the next 3 years to support developing countries in responding to COVID-19 and promoting economic and social recovery. Third, we must strengthen solidarity and promote mutual respect and win-win cooperation in conducting international relations. A world of peace and development should embrace civilizations of various forms and must accommodate diverse paths to modernization. Democracy is not a special right reserved to any individual country, but a right for the people of all countries to enjoy. Recent developments in the international situation show once again that military intervention from the outside and so-called democratic transformation entail nothing but harm. We need to advocate peace, development, equity, justice, democracy, and freedom, which are the common values of humanity. and reject the practice of forming small circles or zero-sum games. Differences and problems among countries, hardly avoidable, need to be handled through dialogue and cooperation on the basis of equality and mutual respect. One country's success does not have to mean another country's failure. And the world is big enough to accommodate common development and progress of all countries. We need to pursue dialogue and inclusiveness over confrontation and exclusion. We need to build a new type of international relations based on mutual respect, equity, justice, and win-win cooperation, and do the best we can to expand the convergence of our interests and achieve the biggest synergy possible. The Chinese people have always celebrated and striven to pursue the vision of peace, amity, and harmony. China has never and will never invade or bully others or seek hegemony. China is always a builder of world peace, contributor to global development, defender of the international order, and provider of public goods. China will continue to bring the world new opportunities through its new development. Fourth, we must improve global governance and practice true multilateralism. In the world, there is only one international system, i.e., the international system with the United Nations at its core. There is only one international order, i.e., the international order underpinned by international law. And there is only one set of rules, i.e., the basic norms governing international relations underpinned by the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. The UN should hold high the banner of true multilateralism and serve as the central platform for countries to jointly safeguard universal security, share development achievements, and chart the course for the future of the world. The UN should stay committed to ensuring a stable international order, increasing the representation and say of developing countries in international affairs, and taking the lead in advancing democracy and rule of law in international relations. The UN should advance in a balanced manner, work in all the three areas of security, development, and human rights. It should set common agenda, highlight pressing issues, and focus on real actions, and see to it that commitments made by all parties to multilateralism are truly delivered. Mr. President, the world is once again at a historical crossroads. I'm convinced that the trend of peace, development, and advancement for humanity is irresistible. Let us bolster confidence, jointly address global threats and challenges, and work together to build a community with a shared future for mankind and a better world for all.